we'll, but we'll start on time. Basically, from my perspective as a resident before I got on council, I felt that there was a decrease in services provided by the city for the amount of taxes we've had. And of course, we know there's inflation, increased rates, increased costs of personnel, and so forth. But I tallied up some statistics based on essentially a comparison between what was done in 2019 versus what was done in 2024 from the audits. And so when you look back at the audit, there's actually kind of an hour breakdown of what some significant contributions to the city has been. So from 2019 to 2024, there has only been a 1.4% increase in the time spent, the man hours spent on street repair. That's a total of 27 hours. Okay, so we all know that there were 96 streets identified by the city that needed repair, but there's only, again, a 27-hour increase, 1.4% increase between 2019 and 2024. Sweeping your street, an 8% increase, a total of 41 hours for that period of time. Alley maintenance, minus 43%. So essentially, almost 266 hours lost during that period of time. Right-of-way maintenance, minus 85%. A loss of work of 1,640 hours.
Right-of-way maintenance.
Signage, 76% decrease. That's almost a 77% decrease. A loss of work hours of 1,479. Brush chipping, 28% decrease. A loss of work hours of nearly 300 hours. Crack seal repair of our streets, 0 in 2019 and 21 hours in 2024. So,
for the whole city? This is for the whole city?
This is for the whole city. Concrete repair, minus 108 hours, so a 24% decrease. Drain maintenance, 82% decrease.
Increase or increase?
A 407-hour decrease.
Did you say decrease?
Decrease in hours spent. And easement maintenance, a 30% decrease. So the perception that we are not quite getting the service that we had in 2019 at least bears out in the audit of work hours spent. Now, going down the line here a little bit, it's sort of interesting to note that in 2024, there are about 6,400 citations, but in 2019, there were 8,780. So essentially, in 2024, the police department cited, the citation rate was 27% less than it was in 2019. Warnings, essentially a 42% decrease, a change of a difference of almost 3,000 warnings. Arrest, a 59% decrease. So in 2019, which is just pre-COVID, essentially the arrests were 1,800, and in 2024, there was 726. Okay, so basically, those are the data that the audits report. Now, I have talked with Kim Turner, and the chief is going to present a 5-year trend in statistics for us. And I'm looking forward to that. And the reason why I'm looking forward to that is because when we look at multiple sites with regard to crime statistics in Universal City, essentially they rate us higher in overall crime rate, significantly higher in overall crime rate. And if I can click this on for a second, this is fairly consistent among these sites. Let me scroll down here. So we have a C- in violent crime, which means we're above the U.S. average. Property D-, well above the national average, and other crimes at D. So basically, according to at least this site, crime in Universal City is costing the city in some way $4.19 million. Now, this is very consistent through these multiple sites. When I tried to look up our reported statistics to the FBI, I found it a little bit difficult, so hopefully the chief will fill us in there. But I find it interesting that essentially the realtors can determine where our crime is happening within our city, but yet we really don't get those reports. So essentially, when council kind of reacts a little bit, at least from my side, in the blind with regard to a proposal by the police department versus essentially an effect, or are we targeting the areas that we should? Are we targeting the areas that we should with the flock cameras and all the other sophisticated stuff that we have? Maybe, maybe not. Perhaps the chief will elucidate that a little bit more.
Bernie, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
I really appreciate these this information, and personally think it should be information that the city should be gathering and presenting to you all instead of you having to do it. But when you talked about public works, all that decrease in effort, what are they doing?
Well, again, there are rising costs. That's true. Okay, and rising costs for materials and also rising costs for personnel type thing. And basically, it will be interesting to ask Randy because Randy, for example, said that we do appropriate alleyway maintenance that's based on if somebody calls, they'll kind of address the issue, or if they stumble onto it, they'll sort of address the issue type thing. So in that particular case, it's well documented in the audits that there's been a decrease in support over that period of time.
And that's reactive in nature, not proactive. And I'm not trying to be smart aleck about this, but if they would address the alleyways the way they address the golf course, then,
To be fair, essentially, Randy says that he's in a position where essentially 80% of his response are to acute issues in the city. And then the other 20% are associated with more prolonged maintenance sort of activities. But the issue is, it doesn't, I just looked at this one, I just got this one recently. This is the VACA type thing, and I've gone throughout this, not a lot of places throughout the city, but I posted these on the council website, and this is fairly typical of the type of stuff that we see out there. And so there's been no street sealing, okay, that's of any significance. And if you don't have street sealing minimally, you don't have essentially a preventive maintenance, and that means essentially that our streets are going to decay faster. If we look at, as Kim has pointed council to on several occasions, what New Braunfels is doing, essentially they have every street analyzed every 7 years. Currently, Public Works is working on a 2009 document of need for street repair. Okay, 2009. And again, they've identified 96 streets that are in critical need of total replacement, $1 million a pop. But when you look at the budget, there's really nothing going to significant preventative maintenance. So when we're done with this $20 million, when we're done with this $30 million in grants in 20 years, we're going to be faced with another 30 million, another 30 million. We'll never catch up to the problem. Yeah.
So I'm a very strong advocate of preventive maintenance up front. We need like a two-part approach, okay? One to fix and one to prevent. But how are you going to educate the residents when they start seeing streets that don't need work, okay, in their opinion, being worked on when their street's not being worked on?
Well, first of all, our city manager has put into this budget a ticket tracking system so that it will be different, somehow different than what we have, in that when the resident complains about something, they'll get a ticket number to follow it. So just like, you have a service request, you got a ticket number, you follow it. And I've asked her to do a come around, that is, do whatever you have to do to fix the problem. And if you can't fix it within a given period of time, ask council for some help, type thing. So hopefully we'll be able to visibly track where the complaints are, rather than, when I go to this area in Devaka, and talk to the residents, they said, they know about that. We told them about that, type thing. And so it's not going to get addressed. It's not on the list even to get addressed in, throughout the period. And like I say, on the council website, I have areas that are worse than this. A couple are on the street repair list, but most are not. Now, how do we accomplish that? Basically, obviously, it needs allocation of money. If Randy doesn't have the resources, the personnel resources, and I'll give you a little more insight on that, to do that, what I'd like to do is stimulate them to get contract services to address it in a systematic fashion. So one of the things that was kind of a heart jerker was in a meeting one time with the city manager and Randy. Essentially, we're talking about why there wasn't any street sealing. And he legitimately said, well, we can't street seal during certain periods of the year, so that when we put down tar, it gets on the resident's car. I said, that makes sense. But there's a gap of time that there could be street sealing. And he actually said at that time, we didn't do it because of the time spent on Snowfest. Now these aren't his exact words, okay, so type thing, but that's what he said, the time of year. And also he seems to have a personnel issue that is beyond the scope of the meeting here. But essentially, from our perspective, what we should ask for when we get a budget is, what are you going to do? What streets are on the list? Okay, that doesn't seem like it should be out of the ballpark. Just to say, is there going to be a street seal? What streets are you planning to address with your $2.5 million budget or whatever it is?
It makes me ask, because I wondered what his thoughts were when the golf course just flooded. So I went down there almost daily, and I see city backhoes, I see city dump trucks, I see city employees working there for an extended period of time. I said, what's not getting done? Contract out the work, get that fixed. Don't dump that on public works to fix.
Well, again, one thing that I did look at, I looked at the full-time full-time equivalent hours, is that, okay. I looked at that between 2019 and 2024, and I was surprised that there's hardly any, there is no difference in the police force and fire department or public works, or whatever, as far as the number of personnel they have. Now, the thing that I'm not sure of is the flavor of the personnel within the departments. Has that changed? Whether there are more managers versus workers type thing. And basically we're at a critical time with the extra jurisdictional area.
ETJ.
ETJ.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
ETJ.
So basically there's already a hint, that, well, we're not gonna have the police force, we're not gonna have the fire department, we're not gonna have street maintenance to cover those areas, type thing. And so that was one of the reasons why most of us were excited about the 5-year projections, type thing. You're only seeing on this update a 2-year because essentially they wanted to simplify it for the presentation that you'll see in the workshop. But 5-year projections are increasing. Now,
What is the status of the comprehensive plan as we're starting to go into the budget? Is it gonna be ready before we start addressing the budget for this coming year?
I don't think so. I think like November is what she said, something like that. Like November is when it's supposed to be done.
And Kim, let me ask you, I mean, you've been around, and what do you think's the difference from the last comprehensive plan to this one? What all did the city do to address that comprehensive plan? And do you think that same amount of effort will be addressed on this comprehensive plan? Does it get done and put on a shelf, I guess, is what I'm asking.
My hope, and really Bear should be answering this, but my hope is that it's a working document, a blueprint, a guide. It doesn't have to be locked in stone, but it's something that says this is what we want as a city, and we're gonna go forward from this point. The last plan, my opinion, is it put in there a lot of goals and objectives that were already like halfway through. So that way when they got to the end, they could say, yeah, we did it. To me, a comprehensive plan should be something that you strive for. So when you get to the end, it's not all gonna be done. It's an ideal.
Well,
Okay, does that,
Yeah, so basically, the previous one, I don't know about the goals and objectives and where they
Okay.
started and all that. I do know that the last one had a list of goals and objectives, and that was one of the big ticket items that we had, was to try to make sure that we were being able to check those off. And then to see them get checked off was always, a good presentation by Kim whenever she would have it. This time, I feel like one thing that we stressed when we were talking with the different companies and interviewing them was we wanted so much more community involvement. I mean, there's so many more opportunities now than there were, however many years ago. So that aspect of the online stuff, and then one thing that they really stressed was, we want to meet people where they're at. So they had different opportunities to be out and to catch a different group of people, right? We're going to catch people at Snowfest that wouldn't even think about talking to us. We'll catch, people at HEB and that type of thing. So I feel like this comprehensive plan really had a real, a big pool of people that were involved in it. But one thing that we've asked, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, is that we do have that. We do have a list of items, and then we also have our dream items. That's what I believe we're going to be seeing out of this.
375. 375 is the number of randomly sampled people that you have to have if you're going to project a win of an election within a certain confidence limit. Okay, so above 10,000 people, it's still about 375, as long as it's randomly sampled. Okay, so basically what you will see as the comprehensive plan unfolds is some of their statistics will deal with 30 people. Some of their statistics will be a convenience sample, okay, that will hit that kind of 350-ish deal to give you the fuzzies and warmies. But when you ask what the confidence intervals are for their data, we'll see. So I agree they reached out, but they didn't randomly sample. It was a convenience sample.
But if I'm at HEB versus I'm at Snowfest, I'd call that random.
It's
Personally,
more,
Isn't
it's,
Snowfest mostly people that don't even live here? Or a lot of them are?
A lot of my friends in town went to Snowfest.
Well, I used to take my grandkids.
it's more of a reach out to the common people. It's not what he's talking about as a scientific survey.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, so he's saying if you're gonna take the sample and project it on the total population, it's gotta be statistically random.
Statistically
So
random
he's just
by
saying that
certain
you may not
age
be able to
groups
say
and
what they have,
ethnicities
that
and
it's
income
representative of the
brackets
whole.
and.
And this is where I go back to my argument of if you don't vote, don't complain, right? If you didn't throw in something on the comprehensive plan, don't complain about the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I don't know that a statistical sample is likely in this scenario because I don't know how many people they would reach out to that wouldn't respond. And then I don't know what you do about those. You probably have to statistically replace those with additional people. And so we're getting into the kind of the weeds of like, what is it gonna be? But I do think it's a fair point that you have to take whatever they aggregate together. You just have to keep in mind that it may not be representative of the whole city. You know, it's the best they could do probably on a reasonable budget to try to get,
Right,
this is what we heard.
yeah, because we didn't want to pay to go door to door because then, then we get less services, right, for that money. So, it was a balance that we tried to get. And whenever we talk about, that's why we tried to talk about, having random opportunities at HEB or at Walmart or at Snowfest, or, hey, we're having an event that, here, come talk to us. That was trying to get that random sampling, but.
And what I've heard, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it is money. Everything we talk about is money. 25% of our sales tax revenue goes to the golf course and park. 25% goes to EDC. Well, you got 50% left of sales tax. So, say Public Works needs more people, needs more equipment. Where's other than property taxes, is somewhere else the city's gonna get the money?
Well, right now, the like this year, and I don't remember what the exact number is. Oh, my voice is not that strong today. It's like, they're giving like $1 million of that back to the Public Works for the parks maintenance and things like that. So they're giving a large number back.
Right.
For that. So I feel like that's in line with where the city is trying to go.
I think that was a good move, yeah, appreciate that.
I liked it. I liked it.
The EDC and the venue tax both in 2024 accounted for $1.8 million in revenue, sales tax group. 1.84.
This is the part that goes to
This year, it's going to be 1.875-ish, somewhere along that line.
That is the part that goes to EDC?
Each.
EDC and the
And
golf
the golf
course. So what, $3.6 million
And
of our revenues?
the city essentially gets twice that, so they get 3.6 mil in sales tax type thing. And a little later, I'll show you the points of disagreement with regard to the current, the budget and projected budget. But I do have some great news. The great news is even without the apartment property tax revenues that are going up here, which, you see that big expansive property now, and you go, gosh, couldn't there have been a Westbury Square or gallery-ish thing there? But that, as I said, the good news is between 2019, this is sort of mixed news, 2019 and 2024, okay, our tax value increases for the city has grown from $1.36 billion to $2.132 billion. So between 2019 and the 2024 year, okay, essentially we have been adding property tax values at a rate of almost 8%. It's actually 7.8% whenever you model it, type thing. And I have an accuracy of about 98% when I say that, based on those
Okay, time
data.
out a second, please.
I'm sorry?
Are you saying the increase from 2019 to 2024 is 7.8%?
The
And the property
rate
value?
of increase, the
Okay, and when
yearly
you
rate of
can,
increase.
when you adjust for inflation and make that like real dollars?
I haven't, these are total appraised value for the
Right.
city, okay? Total appraised value, okay? So basically, when we run our cost for the city, if we keep lower than that, and there are a couple catches there. If we keep lower than that, then we'll build reserve and have money for, and have money for our infrastructure, whatever we need. So those are the data from the audits. Now, it doesn't necessarily turn out, actually, if we were to have gotten all the property tax value at the last year's tax rate of 0.517%, we should have added $11 million in 2024, and I think it was more like 10 or 9 or something like that. So it's a little bit less because of the exemptions and things like that, type thing. But the good news is we were flat for a long time, and then it just started picking up. And the bad news is Bear County is telling us that that's your value, type thing. So for somebody that's under 65 moving in, they're looking more or less at an average 8% increase of their property taxed value per year, which is sort of an interesting thing. It's good for the city as long as we keep our expenses below those rates of increase.
And what percentage of the budget is that?
What percentage of budget?
Yeah, the property tax
The property
revenue.
tax is somewhere around 45. What is it, about 40?
Oh, the revenue?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's about, I mean, you're looking at about $20 million budget, and the general fund gets about a little under 10, so it's about 50% of the total revenue in general
yeah,
fund.
more than 45.
So, my only concern there
Where's
is,
the rest of the revenue coming from?
Yeah,
You've got permits, you've got interest income, we do get grants that go in there, and municipal court's pretty significant, and sales tax, so it's in there too. Plus the venue tax kicks in some money, as Bear was talking about, so all that gets added on top.
so, property tax, or business property tax owners, individuals,
It's a big chunk.
they're the ones that are bearing the brunt of funding what the city does, a lot of it. So, and with Governor Abbott, I don't know all I know is he's focused on property tax. So what if something hits there that then reduces that revenue stream by X? I don't know what it could be. I mean, I would suspect that he's making that a reelection campaign.
Yeah, but none of it has affected the city taxes, that's all been the school district.
I don't know.
The exemption, but he was trying to put in, and I'm not sure exactly what all passed, I don't know if you've heard,
Yeah,
but things like requiring voter approval for more increases,
But
so if we wanted to
is all of that
increase.
for the school district taxes, the housing?
The exemption was for school district.
Oh, okay.
But he also there were some bills floated this legislature about saying, well, if we wanted to go above, say, the no new revenue rate, we had to have voter approval for that.
Oh, yeah.
If we wanted to go to the total voter approval rate, we might have to have like a 66% voter approval, which would have been pretty difficult. So I'm not sure where all that landed, but the definite trend from the legislature was trying to keep property taxes flat for everybody who levies taxes.
Aren't those separate from city tax though?
Well, this was dealing with cities particularly. So
Yeah,
the school
they're
district
shifting
is
from
separate.
school to helping
They did
them on
pass
school
that.
taxes.
They did raise an exemption for the school district.
Yeah, they were trying to make the rules on the cities, on what the city could live in.
Oh, that's all.
Yeah.
To kind of put the numbers to what Phil reported as a percentage, this is tax revenue. Now, unfortunately, they didn't break it out to ad valorem tax and sales tax. This is tax revenue for the city for 2024, the actual and the budget for 2025 and 2026, and I'll explain that in a little bit. And basically, you can see that the ad valorem, your property taxes far exceed any of the other sources of the revenue.
Well, that also includes franchise fees and sales tax. So
Yeah,
in that
yes,
tax revenue
yeah,
number,
yes.
the
It
actual
also-
property tax is 9 of that.
That's right.
9 million of that.
Remember I said it was about 3.6 for 2024, so it'd be about 3.6 less than this, more or less.
With
Yeah, that thing is-
franchise off the top of that too.
Yeah, but still, you can see, this is where revenues, oh, shoot, whoa.
Hey, I could read that.
Yeah. Keep it-
But these are where
That number's up there.
Okay. And you notice that they have projected 5.7 million in total taxes because they really want to put the fear of God in us. Because in reality, we're not going to have a 50% decrease in taxable income, in tax values, okay?
And where did those projections come from?
Well, Kim Turner doesn't like the tax picture to be included as part of the budget presentation. So she's trying not to put a number in there this year so that we're not looking at a property tax number. But really, it's the bottom line negative. I mean, if we need to fill it, then we're going to fill it property tax. So she's trying to say, let's not talk about that right now. Let's just worry about the budget. But we kind of need to know what that number is. But.
Why not? Well, budget is income and output, isn't it?
Well, I guess she wants, and you, correct me if you have a good, I don't know how to read what her thought process is, but I think she wants to talk about what do we need and then how do we pay for it is second. And my thing is more about, well, what do we think we can get, like baseline? If we got last year's taxes, what would we get? And then what can we afford? And then do we need more? And that could be a conversation. But, so I think that's what she's trying to do. I don't know. I think that's what.
I mean, I would imagine that you're pretty much right in there as far as how she's getting. Here's all the things that we're really expecting. So that's going to leave this gap. What do we need to fill that gap? And that's where we kind of base that off of. That's kind of my understanding.
But in this, I'm sorry, is there any proposal or say, look, we're not taking any more money from these people than we did last year? Now work around that.
Well, that'll be part of the conversation, but I think she would prefer to have that conversation later. But I do think it needs to be part of the conversation now to know, well, if we go with this spending, what do we have to do to the taxpayers in order to make this happen? And so, in my mind, I think you would always want to start with a no new revenue rate, which means we get what we got last year plus whatever's new. And I would plug that into the budget and see what we can afford. And if we can't afford it, then we would have some hard discussions about, well, how are we going to make this
Well, that's interesting, because it seems like in the budget processes that I've been aware of a little bit that I know, it seems like they come out and say, here's what we want, and now let's do a tax rate to plug the hole. And versus, no, wait a minute, it should be the other way around. You need to live within a number that you guys put up there, and then go from there.
But in reality, that number could be a wide range. I mean, you could say, if Bernie and I were king, we would say, let's cut the tax rate to below 50 cents, and that might cut off $500,000, and then we have to figure out what are we going to do with that, right? So that would be a completely different picture if we said, if somebody said, no, let's increase it with the rate of inflation. So then we would get this revenue number. So I understand where she's coming from, but there needs to be a little bit more context in terms of what taxes would we need to levy on everybody in order to make this happen, and is that an increase or a decrease? And so that will be part of the discussion. I mean, I will definitely make sure that's part of the discussion. But right now, it's kind of not in there, but it's in the bottom line number, because it does show that if you have that negative, that you've got to fill somehow.
What is the proposed budget there?
So this is for next year. And so she's got everything in there that she knows she can get, or that she thinks she can get in revenue. Everything that they've gone through as a city and said, this is what we think we need. And this is a little bit less than what they originally gave us a couple weeks ago. They did trim a couple things, because I think they thought this number was gonna be a little bit too hard to get. But there's two parts to this, and I'm curious what you guys think about this, because your tax rates are split into two. So part of it goes into the general fund, part of it goes for debt, which is not shown here.
Yeah, but what
The
I'm
last couple of years, we've had the benefit of some extra money in our debt service fund, so we've been able to utilize those excess funds to buy down our debt rate. That's all gone. We don't have that cushion this year. So now we have to go all the way up on the debt rate, which either means we have to take that from the general fund if we don't want to raise taxes, or we've got to raise taxes to cover that. And what's driving that are the street bonds. So the street bonds passed by a pretty good margin, I don't know, 2 years ago or whatever it was. That bill's come due. So now the question is, do we have to eat that bill for that additional street cost? Or do we try to have the general fund cover that extra property taxes? I'm curious what you guys think about that. Should we, like if we said, should we ask you for the same amount of taxes last year plus that extra bond for the streets this next year? Or should we try to make the same amount of taxes as last year?
What I'm saying though is you've got 11 million on there for the proposed budget.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you're bringing in 19 million according to that.
Well, that was different reference here. So this is the 2024 actual.
Yeah.
Here's the 2025 budget. So this is last year, or the year we're in budget.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see it's pretty close. This is what she's saying for next year. This is like a half of the year actuals for this year, where we're at halfway through the year. But she's saying this is what we need next year. The reason this is 11 and that's 19 is because she didn't put in the property tax revenue yet. So because she doesn't know what we're gonna say as a council,
Uh-oh, sad face.
Yeah, so
come on,
again,
Bernie.
so again, that column is kind of bogus, because essentially,
like
if you
me.
look, we're at half a year and we're already at $13 million income.
Yeah.
And basically.
That's not fair,
Yeah.
because all your property taxes come in early.
Yeah, you've
So we
already-
basically
you've
have
already
the majority of our property taxes, but the rest of the year we won't get much.
But you've got another 3 million coming in yet, is what it looks like.
There should be another 6 coming in this year to get closer to the budget number.
Yeah.
This year, there should be about 9 million in revenue there, which will take this up to 20 million too. So once we figure out what our taxes are gonna be, it's gonna be probably somewhere in the $9 million range. And she'll plug that in once we all have our fight out about what the rate should be and how much we should ask for you. That'll be
I'm
in that
just
number.
saying, how do you propose an $11 million budget when you know it's gonna go to 19?
I think it's a little weird. I agree with you. I mean, like I said, I would have plugged in last year to say this is what we can confidently get, I think. And then we can talk about whether that's gonna actually cover it or not.
And then down there, you're talking about a $9 million under.
Right, because that revenue's not in there.
Yeah, I think that's what she's trying to totally delineate, is what is that difference that we need to make up in the ad valorem taxes,
So
right?
you're saying we need 20 million, and right now, we're 9 million short.
And that would
With
be,
no
that would
We
be,
can get the taxes.
that would be
and
the
so
ad
forth
valorem
then.
taxes,
Yeah.
yes, sir. So it, basically, doing it this way, I think it really separates out what that ad valorem need is, and that's how we get there. I could be mistaken, but if I'm looking at a silver lining on how this
Where's the
plays
sales
out, that's
tax
what I'm seeing.
income at?
She's got the breakdown here on the next page, so you can see Right, that 5 million that she's showing is TBD on the property tax revenue. So you can see the rest of the taxes with the franchise fees and the sales tax, but that's why it's less. So she's saying, you know, Phil and Bear and Bernie are gonna fight.
So it still looks like there's gonna be a couple million short.
What do you mean, a couple million short?
And the answer is probably not, but to answer your question most specifically, why do we have a budget that goes over that bottom line number on the right-hand column?
Yeah.
And basically that has to deal with the city being able to prioritize their need, and they've been resistant to that. So there's no department that says, okay, here's our funding requirements, and this is the list of what we need in order, okay? So as a result, council goes back and forth at the very last minute with, well, you know, we may be able to take off $100,000, you know, go back in the back room and whatever. And it's not
I mean, I've run several companies, and when you get a budget, that's what you got.
Well, that's the problem. And as soon as we go through this process, the budget more or less is non-touchable from that point. Okay, so the only other resolve then is they'll want to increase the tax rate, the ad valorem tax rate, to meet that budget, and they don't want to move the venue tax into the general fund to relieve that.
But we moved $1 million.
Let me ask a
I mean,
question.
we've been moving that way, right? I mean, I feel like every year we've moved it further.
done it
I thought you can't move
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
been moving it
you can't
to,
move
well, you
the
could move
venue
it to the parks and things like that, which covers a lot of Randy's expense, so.
Let me ask a question about the expenditures. How did you determine from one year to the next how to increase it? How do you determine,
Basically, we listen to the different department heads and let them tell us what they need to provide the current services. And then every year, like, they would give us like a wish list, right, like capital improvements or something, it'd fall into that CIP. So there would be like hey, this is what we need to maintain, right? This is, and, you know, I need we need a new whatever truck. Okay, well, that new whatever truck goes into your wish list.
that's wish list, but have you ever looked at zero-based budgeting?
Just say,
Oh,
Start from zero and go up. Yeah.
Huh?
I don't think it would be very popular. Right now, they're trying to get out of some, well, I mean,
Well, I mean, if you do zero-based budgeting and people have to justify every dollar that they want for that fiscal year, you've got a better chance of maybe meeting your revenues.
So what percent of you, say you end the budget year this year, what percent went unspent? So what goes unspent, they dump in a reserve, and then they come in and say, well, we need $300,000 more for the fire department. Well, specifically, what are those? I don't know if they go into that detail.
They will. They'll go into that detail. I mean, I can remember in years past where we've had that shopping list and we said, okay, we can buy that amazing doodad for the parks department, but we're not going to buy the fire department anything. You know, the police department, yes, we can hit something there. I mean, I can remember years of where we did, okay, we're going to start chopping down this wish list to a point. But
that's just adding to what they had the year before. If you're buying a new fire truck for the fire department, or a new street sweeper or whatever, but are you looking at the manpower, that do they need X number of people to do that's part of zero-based budgeting. Okay, I need 100 people to do this. Okay, why do you need 100 people? Tell me what each one of them is going to do and what value that brings to the city.
But I don't know if he makes good buy. If you budgeted, I'm just throwing a number, $3 million for a fire truck, and the budget for the fire department was $6 million. So then, do they come in starting at $6 million? I don't need my $3 million for the fire truck. But,
no.
Oh, okay.
No. The big ones like that are.
okay, last year, if I recall correctly, we added like an extra, what, 150,000, 200,000 to the budget just in case something came up. Like, in other words, okay, we had like, this is our budget, and let's add another 150 to it just because.
There was a bottom line surplus, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And see, what happened a couple of years back, okay, the first year after the tax freeze, okay, and this is when, I think Kim started separating everything. The first year after the tax freeze, she had numbers from Bear County that said we really needed an austere budget that year because we were gonna have to jack the tax rate sky high. And so she came in with this really trimmed down budget, and we managed to show that the tax rate calculations from Bear County were wrong. And all of a sudden, there was like all this wiggle room to play, and she started trying to add a whole bunch of stuff. And I think that's when she started saying, we need to separate this out, okay? But, you know, they don't look at it like a business, you know, like people that have run
Yeah.
businesses, or I think you got federal government experience? Or no?
What's that?
You work for the government?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I work for the city. Okay, and we had to like write out forms and stuff. Okay, this is what I want to do. I want to give my employees bilingual pay. Why? What's it going to accomplish? Where's the benefit to the city? How do you justify it? And, you know, you had this whole wish list, but you had to like really justify stuff. You know, she wants to come in with a budget, and you know, I
That's
know,
what's
everyone
called-
knows
That's
the
what's
budget.
called zero-based budgeting.
The budget's already padded, okay? Anybody who creates a budget knows it's like already got, it's already padded to start with. You know, and then you got a wish list on top of that, and it just grows and grows and grows.
And this is where you look to your department heads, right? This is where you look to Ms. Turner and the department heads to have vetted that out. I want to say it was last year that basically they all did basically a cut on what they were, where they were at, and I'm pretty sure it was last year that they ended up.
It might have been the year before, but I know it was like the first year Christine was doing the full budget for the first time, and she said that they needed to go pretty lean.
Yeah, okay.
I think, my conversations with Kim Turner, I think she does a pretty good job of knowing what they're trying to spend and managing, like, okay, I held you off for 2 years on this truck that you wanted, so this year I'm gonna let you put the truck in. I think the hardest thing is the payroll, as you mentioned, is like, how do we know as council, does Randy need all these people, does he need 5 more, or does he need 5 less? That's really difficult, so I have to kind of rely on them to say, this is what they
You
need.
spend contract money to get the work done. You know, that's the position.
Phil, what was that sales tax number? That wasn't our total sales tax revenue.
I mean, it's for the general fund, yes.
Yeah, so this is 50% of what we bring in for sales tax. The other half of that goes to EDC and the golf course and
But,
Is that correct?
But as Bear was saying, we're gonna bring in, say, 1.8 this year in venue tax, and she's got it on here somewhere if I can find it. That this, $1 million of it's coming back to the general fund this year. She also likes to say that there's an amount the golf course pays for overhead, which is this 200,000. So she kind of says, well, 1.2 of the venue tax is coming back. I don't quite agree with that characterization, but I get where she's going with it. The nice thing that she said in her email, which I'm not going to be able to scroll to whatever page it is, but there's for the venue tax, and this was kind of my suggestion that I hope that they're running with, is in the venue tax, we get the 1.8 million. We're taking $1 million and we're putting it in the general fund for parks. We're going to leave the other 8 in the venue tax fund, 800,000, and then we can have a separate discussion later about what are we going to do with this 800,000? Do we give it to the golf course for their projects? Do we give it to the parks? But that way we don't have to necessarily argue about it in the budget. We can do it later because we have an architect coming up telling us what they want to do with the golf course and what it's going to cost. I mean, we kind of have an idea of what they're looking at, but we don't know exactly how they're going to recommend it.
Yeah, so I appreciate that effort. So it does make us look like, it says, okay, we're putting some of the venue tax into our general fund and into the parks. But if you look at the National Golf Foundation, what they said is, for this golf course to break even, you need to pump 1.2 million into it every year. So you're giving $1 million to to the parks, and you have 800 left over. Where are you gonna come up with the next
$400,000.
Actually,
Well, he didn't necessarily need the 1.2, he just modeled it with that 1.2 going into it. And when he modeled it that way, it had a lot more than it needed over the next 5 years or so. So the actual number that it needed to break even with the capital projects he had was less than that 1.3, but he was following what we've been doing, so that's kind of how he modeled it. But it will need some cash if we're gonna do all those capital improvements that were recommended. I don't think it can have enough revenue on its own to afford it. And so that's the discussion that we're gonna have to have is that high priority or not high priority?
I have a question. I saw all those donations to the animal control, the library. Are they supplemental to the budget or are they part of the budget? In other words, do they say, hey, we estimate that you're going to get, $6,000 animal control. Therefore, we can budget you less knowing that you're gonna get that How does that work?
yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't think so.
Say again?
I do not think so. I think if you look at the way they listed, those donations are added as added income. If you go over to the different columns, you notice there isn't anything added. There's spaces, they're type things, so that's not, none of the donations are relied on as income.
So that $1 million of donations and contributions, that's above and beyond the budget. That's above and beyond the budget.
Those are in the budget.
Yeah, you said no?
Those are
They fund the
included in the budget, because most of those are transfers from other funds. Those are paying from one pocket to the other to reimburse the general fund for costs that are in the general fund. But your question's a good one to say, is this funding salaries in the library, or do they get the 20,000 and then they have a party at the library, right? That's kind of what your question was. Is this supplemental? I know for
Is
sure,
that
like,
part of the budget or is it not part of the budget?
I mean, it goes in. I don't know whether they have an additional line item in library expenditures for donations, but I know parks is, like this 135, that's an additional expenditure for parks. There's a related capital improvement that goes with this 135. I can't tell you specifically on the library, but most of the other grants do have an offsetting expenditure that's not part of the operating budget. It's an additional item in order to get that grant.
Okay, so that $1 million of donations and contributions isn't counted as income anywhere.
No, it is.
It is.
Yes.
But most of the times that has to be used for a specific thing whenever it comes in depending on how it comes in.
Yeah, I know,
It
but
has-
money is fungible.
Exactly.
You can move it around.
Right,
So it is counted
yeah. I think
as total income in the top part of the sheet.
So
Yes,
you see the 632 for this year, and when you go back to the summary page, it's got the 632 in that total revenue line item. But most of that is not money coming from outside, it's coming from the utility funds, coming from the golf course fund, so it's not really a donation.
It's not really donations.
Yeah.
The group that you saw there.
The non-departmental expenditures?
Yeah.
Well, most of that's health insurance, so in previous budgets, she had each department handle its own health insurance, but some of that was moved to this non-departmental along with some like telephone, stuff that they didn't want to allocate across all the departments, so they put it there. Do you want to see if you can scroll? My finger one of those. But if you go down to the department, the non-departmental.
Figure, that's why.
But if it's counted as in, I'll go back,
You can try.
because
I don't know where it's at, nor what you're from.
you guys know what a QCD is?
Talents, okay.
Do you know what a QCD is?
No,
When you reach an age, you have to take money out of your
Okay.
401K.
yeah.
Okay? You must take it out and you're taxed on it.
Right.
Unless you give it to a charity, in which case you don't have to pay tax on it. Okay? So I've been giving a couple $1,000, but if it's considered income, it doesn't look like it's going to that source.
It's a fair point. And I think if we have a restricted donation, we should set up another fund for it so that it's tracked for that purpose.
Yeah.
Right now, it's
But
kind of low money.
I'm certain that they have that Christine has some type of, some type of buffers or
Check.
a check and balance to make sure that if it's supposed to be spent that way, that's the way it's spent. I would imagine that that's how she's got her system set up.
The best way you could tell is to call the library director and say, have you ever been asked, hey, we got an extra $2,000 donation, how would you like to spend it? If that doesn't happen, then you're probably correct that it's just going into the general fund and not being directly linked to some additional expenditure.
Yeah,
So if you want it to be an additional expenditure, you might have to ask that question.
Yeah.
To be.
It's like a building fund of the church. If you donate to the building fund and you write that on your tithe or your above tithe.
Well, so, I
donate
mean,
to the building fund.
yeah, but it's fungible. I give $2,000, well, you have $2,000, you just, we will reduce your budget because your goal is, whatever, 200,000 a year, right?
That's possible.
It's fungible.
You asked about the non-departmental, so he has the non-departmental pulled up there. And you can see like electricity on here for streetlights is a big one. And if you scroll down,
Question of streetlights, is that all the city streetlights on all the city streets? Because
Yes,
it says private. To me, that's
yes,
private property
I mean,
streetlight.
Bear might know more.
I would imagine it's a city's private, not TxDOT's.
So it's like the one at DeSoto and Coronado is considered a private streetlight?
I can answer that because I asked that question last year. Yes, that is what they are calling private.
It's actually a public way streetlight,
No,
but, okay, I can understand that. Because there are private ones the city has too.
Yes, that's true. But to me, I've always been surprised at how cheap streetlights are for the city. When you look at that, you go, holy smokes, that's all we pay for streetlights for the entire city for the year?
We need more streetlights.
I can tell you there are few places that could use them.
Bear, I don't want to get into the aviation district plan, I know you.
I'm a rah.
Yeah, but an EDC, why does it need 25% of our sales tax revenue every year? What is it doing with that $1.8 million a year?
Well, we set up, we've got, so like EDC is responsible for the roads in North Lake, right? That's a part of our deal, that we take care of the roads there and the maintenance there. We do, basically we have the storefront improvement program when businesses come to us and say, hey, look, we want to, we want to put a new sign out. We want to paint the front of the building. We want to do something. We want to make it look better.
Well, that needs to be pushed. No, another story. Go ahead. Yeah.
We try to help out there. Every time somebody comes. I mean, I even had one of my churches come in. I'm like, hey, let's go for the sign thing, right? But lawyers, and whatever. But it's one of those things that we try to increase the curb appeal of Universal Cities businesses. We try to help them out whenever they have a building program. We try to incentivize people that are bringing businesses that are bringing people into UC. Like right now the big one is Gather. We've got the one in North Lake that MergeWorks, that they took that one big building that was totally vacant and bought it, redid part of it. We helped them out a lot. Planet Fitness, we helped them come into UC. So we're looking for those that are draws from people outside or heavy employers. Those are the ones that we really try to put money towards. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. If a business comes and you give them money, I guess they give you documentation what they're gonna do with the money,
Yes, ma'am.
whatever, okay, all right. And to improve their business, it's not our business, it's their business, but it's our money helping them.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. They don't last very long. They go out of business. Okay, that happens a lot.
It does.
We had a business before and nobody paid for our signage, we never got anything. And we sold our business and then they took whatever, okay? So I understand trying to help people, but if they don't have the money to buy the business and set it the way it should be, they shouldn't be here, in my opinion.
Or if you give them $250,000 and they go out of business, you need to get that $250,000 back from the sale of the property.
And there are requirements that we're required by state law to put onto those sorts of things. And in order to get that money back, they call it a clawback.
Yeah.
But my understanding is that that's next to impossible in a lot of cases, especially if somebody declares bankruptcy. Basically, what we look at is, what's it gonna do to that building, right? I'm not buying your new stove for the restaurant. We're gonna pay for the signage. We're gonna pay for the improvements to the building.
The facade or whatever.
Yes, sir. So stuff that will stay in Universal City.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for. We try not to do things, I get it, because, I know a guy who owns a business right there in North Lake, and he owns the building, and he would love to come to the city for economic development money. But I keep telling him, no, you can't do it, you're still on council and it's still an EDC. But it's also one of those things that it's for improvements to the building. It's not to line the owner's pocket.
Okay, another question. How do you determine how much money this business is gonna get versus that business versus that business?
It
Who
is,
decides that?
there's a little bit of a moving scale, basically. There's not a set in stone. We've been trying to get something a little bit more
Like more,
regimented.
yeah, we'll give you up to this amount, but you gotta prove that, number one, you spent it on the building. And we have to approve what you've done to the building, we have to approve what you're going to do to the building, you're not gonna paint it striped, you're gonna paint it a solid color.
Right.
Okay, so there's people that control that, because some people get a lot of money, and some people get a little money, and some people don't get anything.
Well, the only time somebody's not getting whenever they have not we haven't given anything to them was when we had been through the process several times with them and they did not complete it any time. I was like, wait, come back whenever you're positive you're going to do it. Or before my time on EDC, when the church came and the lawyers got involved, that one was denied. No, actually, that approved the EDC. Council denied it. That's right. Because again, it was for the signage, it was to bring people in to UC. What we're looking at is if it's a $50,000 sign, we will pay half of it.
It's a lot.
Used
Right.
to be limited, like to 5,000 or.
There's a number like $15,000 for storefront improvement, but we also have that pot for business incentives, right? Because when you look at the budget for storefront improvement, it's like $300,000 or $380,000, but we have business incentive pocket as well.
Well, I make that lower, that's a lot of money. Just to hand to somebody, in my opinion.
I'm going to respectfully disagree. As a guy who would love to put a sign out front of my yard at the office, it would be huge for us to put a sign out there. And so I see that.
$5,000, that's a lot of money to most of us.
I'm sorry?
$300,000 is a lot of money.
I'm not giving that to one person. Well, typically, unless it's a giant investment in the city's comprehensive plan.
Yeah, the
So
signs
there's
that I've
no
seen
limit?
are not usually that
No.
significant.
It's
Signs
the
are-
EDC committee, they have a committee that decides.
Yeah, there's a board,
It's arbitrary, I
economic
think,
development.
I don't know.
Generally, the general rule, as I understand it, is for the signage, it's 50% of the signage. Unless it goes above, I think it is $15,000. And then if it would go above $15,000, then it does have the council, or there's a limit before it goes to council.
The signage is not the big ticket item.
Yeah,
It's the building improvements.
Okay, so wait. How much EDC money is currently tied up in the EDC real estate business?
Oh, a decent amount.
We got a lot of holdings,
Yes, ma'am.
and that's where the money's at. We floated bonds, EDC bonds.
Yes, ma'am.
We've mortgaged the future of EDC so that we can get money now. Somewhat.
Not really more, because when you say mortgage of the future of EDC, that puts such a
Okay, but we have obligated the future EDCs of this city to pay those bonds.
Yeah, because we, as the EDC, looking at what the comprehensive plan and saying, hey, this is the area that we need to develop. Believe me, I would have loved to have had one developer come through and say, okay, we're gonna buy this one, we're gonna buy all these properties. But what that developer wants is, they want more people, they want a denser population with
Oh, we're working
more
on
disposable income. That's what they're chasing, right?
Okay, so all this land that we're holding, what kind of time frame are we looking at for actually selling that land? Or are we gonna sell that?
Oh, we're gonna sell that land as soon as we can.
And then the money goes where?
Basically, it'll go back to the EDC to pay for the bonds.
Can we pay the bonds off early?
That's a great question.
So they have like a 10-year timeframe where you can't prepay. But to be fair to EDC, they've also taken out the bond for North Lake, so they're putting in the road infrastructure for all that development out there, for Chick-fil-A and all of that.
Reunion.
So, I mean, I think that's a good thing.
And yet they wouldn't approve funding for Vaughn companies.
Yeah. My boat ran. My boat ran.
Yeah,
But
okay.
have you guys, EDC though, back to the grant part, have you guys thought about more of an abatement structure where you give them back what they generate taxes over a certain amount of time, so that you're not in that situation where you gave it up front and if they go under, then you might lose it all. But if you say, we're gonna give you back all the property taxes and sales tax you generate from here forward, up for 10 years for a maximum amount of this, but we'll give that back to you over time. I know I talked to Kristen about that one time when she was still here, and her answer, and I'm trying not to answer your question for you, but I'm gonna tell you what she said just to see if that resonates. But that some of these businesses needed the cash up front, and they didn't want to wait for those abatements to kick in. So I'm just curious if that's the kind of the mindset, or if there's been talk about an abatement structure.
We have talked about an abatement structure in the past, but this one has been fairly effective for the EDC. We've just watched the improvements that have happened over time. I can't say that we've gone into depth on an abatement structure option. I can't say that we've gone into depth on that.
Well, what about the improvements to North Lake?
Yes, sir.
6 years ago, I did some volunteer work for EDC, and I walked from one end of Pat Booker to the other. I don't think you were there. The biggest thing that I heard from the businesses was that few businesses own the building. And the building owners, a lot of them now are owned by private equity, that owns various companies, that they were not interested in doing the improvements because they had a steady stream of cash. And it seemed to me that what we were going to do, if in fact, as the EDC rolled along, is would have a bunch of very nice empty storefronts because we're not helping the individual businesses, all right? They're just renting, like there's a bead shop. I don't know if there's still a bead shop there, but there was a bead shop, right? And talking to the owner, or the flower shops. Talking to the flower shops was sort of interesting. They said, geez, we just want to put some stuff, have a packet of the 3 flower shops given to people who are planning for weddings. So they know that we can provide them with weddings. I don't know if it was ever done, but it would seem to me that a viable way is to collect information on the businesses and include them in some sort of website adjacent to the city website saying, hey, here's what you can get in Universal City. do we know that there's 3 flower shops? Do we know that there's a couple printing shops and one of them makes banners? And I didn't know that. I've lived here 30 some odd years until I walked the streets. So anyhow, there are things, there's nothing wrong with helping the building owners. But I think the EDC should help businesses too.
Well, and that's part of why we give that amount of money is because they, like what Phil just said, was they.
But you're not giving it to the individual businesses.
Well,
An example
but it's
there,
not.
an example, okay? One Gateway magazine issue a year, one issue a year.
Yeah,
Could be a directory,
yeah,
like a phone directory, a business directory.
here.
Yeah, I mean,
That
okay.
deserves a high five.
Oh,
That deserves a high five.
Oh, yeah.
when you go to the golf course website, you know, it's like when you go to like, say, like the Dallas Zoo website, it says places to go and visit, places to stay, places to eat. So you go to the golf course website, it doesn't link to any businesses in Universal City. It doesn't talk about any restaurants, it doesn't talk about any flower shops. You know, actually, I think it talks about places nearby that are not in Universal City. The last I looked. Yeah, but that's, okay, the flower shop and the golf course is a no-brainer. I mean, really.
That's a great idea as far as is where what you're talking about. Now, you on the other hand, just kidding. The thing is that if it's not that the building owner is paying for the sign, it is the building owner requires the tenant to pay for the sign. So if we help that tenant pay for the sign, now that tenant does have more free money for their business. So that's where I feel like we do get a double hit on
That's,
the building.
I'm not complaining about everything you do. I'm just saying,
That's my life.
if we focus on the businesses a little bit more, it would be helpful.
No, I agree with you on that. I like where y'all where the two of y'all brains got that sort of thing rolling. I like that, and I took a note.
Well, can I ask you on the aviation district plan on a big picture?
Yes, sir.
You know, the master plan says nothing about a revenue generator for the city. It just says to revitalize an area of the city. Where do we want to, what are we looking for in 10, 20 years?
Oh, man, if I had 2 or 3 gathers down there and I had some really cool loft house, apartments down there, if I had more of a walkable where I could have little streets, little shops, I'd be geeked out about that.
So it's just a nicety for the residents?
I'm looking for a place that people are gonna come. If you could give me like a beer garden down there, I would be.
Build more splash pads, or build a swimming pool. That thing is crowded.
That thing is
7 days a week.
crazy full, right?
Yeah.
So what we were.
We use that.
not always you see.
Yeah, when we got started on that, it was really a push for life at night. That was what we kept hearing was we want more life at night. We're tired of driving to Cibolo and to Schertz to do things after 7 p.m. So that was, well, where are these people going? They're going to these little, and I hate to use the word, but trendy little locations where I can park and then I can get out and I can walk and there's somewhere for me to stop and have a drink or somewhere for me to have something to eat. And that's kind of the ultimate goal is that we have various activities for people, not just somebody that wants to go have a drink at a bar and listen to music. We want to have people where they go shop or have some ice cream. And then the places that are open during the daytime as well and in the evening. Because again, what that does is that increases that sales tax, right? That increases that sales tax and that ad valorem tax. Sorry, you disagree. No, it doesn't. But it increases the value of the area down there. And one thing that I want to say is that the EDC has not pressured anybody to sell their property.
That's not completely true. I mean, I know you haven't directly said you have to
The gloves
leave,
are coming out.
but you've said this business can't be this business if you ever want to leave or sell it. So like if you have
Name it.
well, I don't know if I should out people, but Woody's Garage is out. So you have a garage, you're saying you can't be a garage anymore. You can have it there for as long as you want, but if you ever want to sell, it's rezoned something else.
I don't
So
think that
they're
was
in a,
EDC.
well, whoever. So, okay, maybe the EDC wasn't the one that did it, maybe it was the city as a
It was a
whole.
zoning issue.
Okay, well, I don't know who did it.
Don't
Whoever
get mad
did
at EDC for that.
It was the zoning committee that did it.
Yeah, and again, we have, anytime I go on the Facebook and I see we need another, people talking about, what's that business gonna be? Oh, it's either gonna be a taco shop or a tattoo parlor
Or a smoke shop.
car wash or a smoke shop,
Or a coffee shop.
right? Or a coffee
Yeah,
shop.
coffee shop.
My thing is quit going to those,
Well, that's it.
because there's so many people that go to those.
People want it.
People want it, so that's what the market is driving. So what does the city do? Well, how do we curb that with zoning, right? I remember when Pat Booker was nothing but auto shops and car repair things and things like that.
It catered to the base. Yeah.
Yeah.
It catered to the clientele of the base.
And so, and that was before I was ever involved in anything here. And so the city determined, the zoning and council at the time was like, then let's zone this out, right? Let's not allow any more automotive repair on Pat Booker. So if you're in there, you're in there. And that's kind of not EDC, but that's more zoning.
Have you looked at developers?
Oh, yes, sir. So everybody's mad about, why do we have 2 apartments? Because those properties sat vacant forever and for sale. And I took a plan to a couple of developers to turn in Junkie Joe's into it had bowling, it had putt-putt, it had a dog beer garden thing,
A Santico's Entertainment Center.
Basically, yeah, something like that, a little scaled down, a little bit more fitting the area. All they did was look at it and they were like, you don't have the population, you don't have the income.
Well, what I was thinking more of, I do a lot of work for some guys that own hundreds of apartment buildings. And most of them they own in San Antonio have upper apartments and lower businesses.
That was a part of that plan that I threw out there, Adam, and basically a mixed-use development. Again, there's still not the population or the income to support it.
It wouldn't matter, I mean, if you put retail down below, you're gonna get something, whether it's a nail salon or a coffee shop or something, to pay the rent until you get the population.
Isn't there supposed to be something like that in East Aviation? I know Casada was big on that.
That's what he would like to have.
Yeah, that's what we're pushing for down there. That would be,
It's not.
we have different developers looking at different things,
Okay.
but nothing,
Nothing's started. Okay.
no contracts signed yet. I'll say that. Yes, ma'am?
I have 2 questions. One, before I forget, the money that gets given to I'm back on the storefronts.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
I'm all about it.
How many times are they allowed to get money? Is it one and you're done? You pay it something? Because I have heard through the grapevine over all the years we've lived here that, oh man, all of a sudden this store is redone and it's redone again and it's redone and it's like, and then there's still no business in there. So how many times are they allowed to collect from the kitty bank, or the piggy bank?
Let's say it depends on the business and it depends on what they're doing. If Phil comes in and says, hey, I need $20,000 for a new sign, okay, great. Here.
How long has he been there? How long is he gonna stay there? Is
Right.
he bringing in the business to pay for that.
How long ago did I ask for something?
Yeah, and then if, next year Phil comes to us and says, hey, I need $10,000 to put up a carport. Okay, let's talk about what is that doing for,
How's it gonna bring people in?
right, how's that bringing more people into what
Right.
you've got now? Well, it's actually a carport with a water park. Oh, yes, let's do that.
Do they have to put some of the,
Oh, they have
put
to.
some of the bill too, or?
They have to pay 100%, and we don't pay anything until they have paid, until it's completed and they've paid for it.
And usually you only cover 50%, right?
And we usually only cover 50%, if that. There are some instances where it depends on the business. We've gone above that. And it's like a $3,000 improvement, but wow, that's a great draw for this area. So yeah, we'll pay that full $3,000 because you're bringing in people from everywhere for this event. And a lot of times it's usually not a needy situation, but it's a good deed situation.
And the other question I had, and a lot of my friends have said, what's gonna bring the people off of 35, where there's everything under the sun on 35, into this community, because you're having to drive from 30, right now they can go off here to IKEA or whatever, everybody knows that. And I talk to people and they're like, you live where? And I said, Universal, where's that? And I said, oh, I go up down 35 all the time, and I don't, you know what I'm saying? So how, because you've gotta bring the people to pay for what we wanna do here.
Yeah, marketing and visibility.
That's the hard part.
Yes, ma'am, I agree.
You want me to stand on the street and call people in, or what?
That's a.
Jump up and down with
Flip
the
a
sign.
sign, yeah.
Only if you get paid.
$1,000 an hour. I'll pay it back next.
Well, and one thing that the EDC had tried to do for a while was like early on when Google was starting to do like Street View and the businesses is like, hey, we'll pay for you to hire this company or a company to go in and do all the interior pictures for your Google whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that just didn't take off, right? It never really was utilized or anything like that. But it was looking for new marketing opportunities. But
I think a
like-
website though, like they
Yeah.
were talking about, with all the businesses listed and so forth,
And if you have pictures,
Even-
oh my gosh, pictures
even if
are,
you charge them a small fee to be on there every year, it would pay for the site anyhow.
yeah, no, I like that idea, and that's definitely something that.
Because that's something people outside of the city can look at, you know.
You know, I'm not,
Yours, as far as the magazine, that only goes to the people in the city pretty much.
Right,
If you got a website,
do both.
Yeah,
Do both,
yeah,
yeah.
okay, yeah.
they used to put a map in there
Yeah,
several years ago with all the businesses and where they were located and all that.
But I think the city needs something, somebody doesn't wanna come drive in here for a vape shop, somebody don't wanna come in here for a nail salon. I mean, that's what I think the problem is. What draws people to Cibolo shirts, I don't know, maybe it's the restaurants, I have no
they
idea.
have a vibe, and I don't know that we're ever gonna get that
Yeah.
vibe, I know you're looking for
We're
it.
trying,
But I don't know that we're gonna get that, I don't see what's so wrong with being that sleepy little bird. I mean, I.
save your money.
and again, that's why we take that comprehensive plan and we get that group of people to say something, right? And we get everybody to, because honestly, if on that comprehensive plan, if there was only like my 5 people that I knew were on that and they were yay gung-ho about that aviation plan, that said, yes, aviation, let's keep going. But the majority of people said no. I would have swallowed that pill and said, okay, that's a no. Now, what you're talking, can we have a sleepy little bird? Does it all
Something
have
used to pay for
Yeah,
it.
right. That's where we get frustrated, where we get. 8:30. Thank you very much. Sorry, I have a very difficult. I can't say that. I have a very important client that has something going out tonight, so at 8:30 I turn into a pumpkin.
Patty, you had something you wanted
To
to
the
say?
public.
Okay, you wanted to say something?
I was just gonna go back, I wasn't a big fan of the aviation thing, but a couple weeks ago, when the Gather had that marketing thing, that market event, I don't know if anybody drove by there, I wanted to go to it, and I could not park.
What's marketing?
It was
It's over the
so,
market days.
market
Oh, I
days, they
didn't know
had.
that.
So if we did something like that, maybe quarterly, to
Oh,
get people in.
They're doing it
is-
every month, I believe.
Are they?
Yeah.
That was extremely.
Do people rent tables or what?
Yeah, and like booths, I guess it had food and vendors and
Yes, ma'am.
I couldn't go to it, I couldn't get rid of my car. I mean, they were parking over.
We parked in the grass, don't tell the police, we parked in the grass to get there.
It was.
Can we go back to a
very
question that
expensive.
Bill asked earlier? He
Sure,
was
it was
asking,
very smart.
It was,
Very sure it was very smart, whatever it was.
it was about the tax rate, and it's very important, because with the street bonds coming due, I guess you said there's a payment that we're gonna have to make, and so that the, what do y'all call that, the INO rate?
the.
INS.
INS is gonna go up this year,
Right, because,
so then the other part's gonna have to go down, or else it's gonna have to go up too. And our taxes are either gonna go like really up this year, or the budget's gonna have to get tightened. Is
Right,
how it
so-
sounds.
no, that's exactly right. And so I'm curious what you guys think on that. I mean, I always kind of default to the no new revenue rate, which means we're gonna get last year's plus whatever the new properties are. But if we do that, it's gonna be a cut in the general fund. So I'm curious what you guys think. I'm kind of, in my head, I'm thinking, well, what if we did the no new revenue rate plus whatever was approved for the bonds? And so I asked Kim Turner for that language, like what did we actually market? I think it was a little over a penny on the tax rate, which is about $200,000. So I was thinking if we did a no new revenue rate plus the 200,000, that maybe that's something I could swallow if I had to, but that's why I'm curious about your feedback. Should we, I do think our tax rate is a little bit too high compared to our neighbors. I know Bear wants more sales tax to really pay that off, but what do you guys think? Is it time to pay the bill on the street bonds, or should we continue to tighten our belt on the tax rate as much as we possibly can?
What do you mean, is it time to pay the bill on the street bonds? Do we have a choice?
Well, I mean, it has to be paid, but do you want to pay it through your property taxes, or do you want us to find another way to pay for it by tightening the city's belt on some of the costs that it's going to incur? So, for example, let's see what's in there.
tax rate is already higher than the city's
Like, there's some, those are things that they took out. See if I can find an example of something that she is spending.
How much is the payment gonna be on the bonds this year?
It's around 260. I can get out here.
260,000?
Yeah, so it's these 2023. So the total is I was a little off on that. About 450 the total is. But in the last 2 years, we brought in this much in taxes, but we were able to use some of the existing money that was in the debt service fund so that we didn't have to raise our taxes all the way up to get to our total debt service. This year, we're not going to have that option. So we got to levy this much to pay for our debt, because our debt's payments are 2.2. And that includes that street bond for 2023. So the question is, there's a $600,000 increase for debt, put it another way.
Okay, $600,000 increase is what percent on property tax? Roundabout,
Ooh,
like 2%?
600,000 on 12 million. It's like 5%.
Another 5%
Another
increase?
5%. Now there's $100,000 that's coming from new property this year. So they would be able to pay for 100,000 of it. So we need an additional 400,000 to make this work. So if we kept the general fund flat, which right now the general fund's increasing a little bit. So you add the general fund increase plus the debt side increase, and that's where it's, a 5-6% increase on what you would have to pay the city in taxes. So that's where I'm coming back to is, what do you think about the proposal of having to pay a little bit more from the street bonds versus trying to find another way to pay for them?
Well, obviously the other way to pay for them is to get a value tax to zero.
It's true.
$1.85 million Okay, so, it seems like a no-brainer.
Isn't that already in there, figuring out, giving part of it?
There's a million of the 1.8, so there's another 800,000 that could potentially be given to the general fund. The problem with that, and I would be in favor of that. The problem with that though is we're gonna become dependent upon it in the general fund, and then it will make it really difficult then to redirect it to the golf course if we ever do have to redirect it to the golf course. So there's hesitation there to say, let's dump it in the general fund to make our budget, if in the future we're gonna have to undo that to give it to the golf course.
Needs to be taken away from the cookbook.
Well,
But
you're gonna get lots of
needs to be
opinions
changed.
on that.
Right, and what is a 5% to the average? I mean, what does that look like in dollars and cents, right? You got 5%, that you're gonna pay the city 5% more. What does that look like in dollars and cents on a year or a monthly?
Sure, so yeah, so I think the houses are about 300,000 is the average, and our tax rate's around 50 cents. So most people pay about 1,500 in taxes. So if you did a 5%, it would be like $75.
I don't know where you come up with that 1,500 from.
Just the.
Well,
That's
that's
just
just
city
the
tax.
city.
That's just city taxes.
Not your whole
Yeah.
tax bill.
Yeah, but you have to pay the whole thing, not just the city.
know.
See, and you
Yeah,
can,
this stuff is more.
you flip the argument around and say cut 5% from all expenses in selected areas where it's not gonna hurt safety, public works, da-da-da-da-da. And that 5%'s in there. But it would be difficult to pass, to get that past our council.
Because you'd be looking at about an extra $150 a year.
75, if we did a 5%.
For the
Yeah.
city part. That's
So
only for
the average home will pay about $75 more on the city, which
Everybody else was.
That's
I
$6
mean,
a month.
it's not a giant number. To me, it's more the principle of it.
Yeah.
So if we have a $20 million general fund budget, in order to make this work, we need to find, say, 500,000. That's the question is, do you want us to find that 500 from you guys? Or do we want to find 500 in the budget to cut? And there are some low-hanging fruit in there.
Let's go hash with them.
Well, that's probably where it's gonna hit.
Have you seen Phil and I at this type of event?
How many managers you got at golf course?
3.
Yeah, one.
Do with 2?
I mean, I think so, but I've never run a golf course before. That's just my pie in the sky thinking about how I would do it, but
But you have one for the events, you have one for the grounds, and you have one for the golf himself, right?
Wow, 'cause I was thinking one for the grounds and the golf itself, but
Yeah, from the golf association people, that you really want to have two, right? One to manage everything, and so he's on top of that all the time. And then, one to manage the golf side, to be on top of all that. Is my understanding. I could be correct.
I don't think he's wrong. I guess the question is what do you title them and what do you compensate them?
Yeah.
So right now it's about 400,000 for the 3 of them.
Yeah.
So if you think about, if we had a $400,000 pot of money, if you were gonna redesign it from the ground up, how would you redesign the positions? And there might be some opportunity to redesign them a little bit to where they were a little bit less. But I'm always of the opinion if the golf course can live within its budget, I'm more likely to let it do whatever it feels it needs to do to make it happen.
yeah, that's the way I am. If it's funding itself, I don't care what they do.
Exactly. So that's the hard part is that it,
But if I'm funding it, then I care what they do.
right.
Right, and it's gotten, I mean, because from when I started to where we are today, I feel like the golf course has come leaps and bounds, right? From whatever, 10 years ago to today, to see where that is. I give Christina so much of this credit as well, to help with that budgeting process. I think that for the golf course to cover its own system, its own, thank you. That was not coming. Its own operating costs, but then for the city to provide any improvements to the facilities or things like that, I'm a proponent of that. I don't think that the golf course should have to Now, unless they tell me they want to put in some crazy zip line, which I would definitely support. But if they want to do something that's only for golfers, I don't know if I could get behind something that's
No,
super expensive. Now, if we talk about what's going to be for golfers, but for various levels of golfers, so that we're bringing in more than just the guys that really know how to play, I think that's a benefit, to the whole system.
They had some good suggestions on that front.
They really did, and one of the ideas is to make it like one of those electronic type driving ranges. And I've got friends that are constantly, having business meetings at this thing, at these places. But our big headache is, I think what you said, we'll have to hire you to sit out there with that street sign saying, come do your virtual driving.
Depends what it pays.
well, we were talking
It would
about a
be so
website.
cool if they had something like an internet where you could like reach out to people.
And that's the thing, yeah.
Someone needs to invent that.
We were talking about a website. Doesn't the golf course have one?
Oh, they do, and when that time comes, I think that would be huge on their marketing.
Why couldn't you include that with other stuff from the city? You said, you're not gonna come in here for a vape shop, but you might come in for a splash park or the other park.
What a nice restaurant.
Yeah.
Some of the better restaurants,
Well, and I think that, like, if you go to our website, I think the splash pad is one of those that first pops up as far as when you get on the website. I know it's,
It's on the city website,
yeah.
but it's not on the golf course website.
What about a food park,
So
like
you want
food
to
trucks
say-
next to the splash pad in that
That would
grassy
be so
area?
cool.
Because you got a captive audience.
That'd be so cool, but I think that's a park.
If you want to get more golfers in there, widen out the damn holes.
That's on the proposal.
When the families wide
And shrink the traps.
The course,
When the fairways
like you
wide.
say, it's for the top golfers.
Right.
Well, that's one of the suggestions is widen the fairways.
Yes,
That was in
that
the-
was one of the
yeah.
suggestions. And right now, we're waiting on the golf
widen
course
them a lot.
architect to give us some.
Especially some of the front line holes, gosh.
I have a question, I have to go back to the budget, because that's where all this starts.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Right? Okay.
There's too many golf balls on that
When
front line.
departments do their budget, is it I need this, and I need this much money, or is it documented where everything's lined out? This is why I need it. It takes a lot of time to do a budget, but that's the way you need a budget, not somebody's wish list.
No.
And then they can convince you that, I only need one of these, but I'm gonna ask for 5, so I'll get 1 or 2. You know what I'm saying? I've worked with a lot of people over the years on budgets, and let me tell you, they will pad
Yes, ma'am.
it to the ends of the earth. But there needs to be some accountability for them to document everything and explain to who their boss is why they need 3 of these and they can't get by with 1.
Oh, zero.
There
Okay?
is.
And I'm sure, that happens, and it's a lot of good old boy systems like, don't worry about it, I'll give you yours and you give me mine. I mean, that happens, I'm not saying about the city, but I'm just saying, I've worked with all kinds of people and that happens. And we can't keep paying the bill for it.
No, ma'am. From what I've seen in years past, it would be like a marathon of so many meetings. And they would do like line items of each department. And now we really gloss over it because basically it's one of those, now Bernie does not. Bernie will get into every budget's, everybody's.
Oh, Bernie knows how to do that, I know that.
Yeah, and how much did you spend on paper clips last year? Did you use all of your paper clips? Yes, we used more and we had to borrow some from Phil.
You're not supposed to throw them away, you're supposed to keep them in a little kitty.
Exactly,
thing.
exactly.
again.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And so each department has that type of thing where they have a historical background for what they have spent on that. And then they do have the ones where it's like what Phil was saying, how we're no longer responsible for phones. That's going into this section of the budget, right? So now their budget moves down, or, wow, I'm responsible for life vests for Randy's department. His budget needs to go up because he's never had to buy a life vest before.
Now, if a change needs to take place due to things beyond anyone's control, okay, then is there like a committee meeting, or they just say, hey, I need this, approve it, kind of thing? I mean,
Both. If something, in my mind, if there's something of like an emergency situation.
well, I'm not saying emergency, but sometimes people are like, oh, I'm gonna ask for 4 now because I've got this other project, I can really get by with 3, but I'm gonna ask for 4. And a change to what's already happened. I'm just telling you, I've worked with all kinds of people, and they're wanting stuff all the time.
Just FYI, so like an example, this year and last year, there's $50,000 for oil in vehicle maintenance. And if you look in the departments, there's also a maintenance, a vehicle maintenance fee. And I talked with Kim, I talked with her last year, and I said, this doesn't make sense, you know? How can they possibly be spending $50,000 in oil, in type thing? And this year she cut it by 25,000. Okay, so, and that was as a result of me. So there's some back and forth there. But that being said, essentially you have to point out the obvious. Okay, and basically if you're not allowed to point out the obvious, then it becomes very frustrating. An issue that's going to come up is essentially salaries. Okay, so basically we're going to hear 2 things. We're going to hear cost of living increases, and we're going to hear step increases. Okay, and basically be very sensitive to that, because they're talking about, in some scenarios, a cost of living increase of over 7.5%. That's a COLA, where the government's given a 3.5% cost of living increase.
We actually have 7.5 in our budget?
It's being talked about.
Only in 2 departments.
Being talked about. The second
Only the 2 departments to keep up with the changes.
The second
At the
thing,
lower level.
the second thing that has been instituted from prior councils is a 2.5% step increase over a 20-year period. So basically, when you take 2.5% for a yearly increase over a 20-year period, you wind up with a 59% increase in salary compared to the federal government that winds up with a $15,000 increase. So it's a twofold difference in the step increases, because the federal government does not go every year. They go at a higher rate, 3%. But essentially,
The step or COLA?
yeah,
Increases
so
every
this
3
is not a
years.
COLA. This
Separate.
is
Until you get to a
step-
certain
this
point.
is a step increase.
Separate from the COLA, right?
So basically, I think we have to be careful. Yes, we have to be competitive, but we have to be realistic for where we're at, because salaries are one of our big ticket items across the board, type thing. So,
But you know, we give this salary and and I brought it up before, I know, but we've never done a comp study, classification and compensation study. Y'all were talking about, I think you said the lower level people are gonna get the higher raises, which is where it's needed, the turnover's higher and stuff like that. Okay, but I think, just like we have some people that I think are undercompensated, I think we have people that are overcompensated, you know, and you know, obviously you can't go and cut salaries, you know, but you can like kind of tap
But you
down
can
those,
limit what somebody gets.
you
though.
tap down those increases to kind of bring them down to where they're supposed to be. Because market conditions determine what wages ought to be. And the market conditions for, let's say, police officers changed drastically after George Floyd. Okay, I mean, that just totally changed the picture nationwide, and it hasn't been fixed. And our police officers, I don't know, I haven't looked at it in a few years, you know, and I don't know what our turnover rate is, but I don't necessarily think we pay them enough, and B, that we have enough of them.
Well,
When-
I would agree with you, but she did use the San Antonio surrounding area compensation study that they do. to
Should
compare.
they, when you do that, you pick and choose which ones you want to put in your little data set.
It's true.
I
it's
mean,
true.
I've done those, okay? I mean,
Yeah.
I've done those. You pick and choose which ones you want to report so that you can skew your results.
Right, but
Okay, but it
don't
doesn't.
you think that you would want her to adjust the rank and file police and fire? I mean, this is kind of what I've been fighting
Yes,
for, is instead of just 5% across the board, it's targeted.
Targeted, yes.
But
Okay.
there is still 2% going to the upper level, which, okay, it's better than what I would, I
Yeah.
still think there should be a cap for a civil servant, like you get to kind of a level and there's really no
Well,
growth.
the
but-
city, when we had our step raises, when they put it in, it was every 2 years, but it maxed out, they brought you like to your top salary like at 10 years. You know, instead of having to wait for 20 years to peak out, I think at 10 years you peaked out. But then you had nothing except your COLAs after that.
Unless you advance to a new position.
Right,
Right.
but
Oh, there has to be a cap.
the staffing level of the police department, I was at the airport, which was part of the city, and we worked off of San Antonio's plan, and they had what they call a patrol availability doctor. And what that was is you figured out how much time are you on patrol, no, how much time are you writing reports, making arrests, transporting prisoners, you know, washing the car, all the other stuff. And when all of that's done, how much time do you have left for patrol? And that was how they figured out when they needed more manpower. That's that documentation. We need more officers. Why do you need more officers? Because we're handling all these calls. We're making all these arrests, but our arrest rates are down compared to 5 years ago. So I don't know how he's going to justify it. But, you know, I think, speaking in generalities, there's a certain relationship that happens between the city manager and the department heads. And if the city manager tells the department heads, hey, I need you to really toe the line, they're not going to come before council and say, I need more police officers. Okay, speaking in generalities.
So when you, specifically the police and the fire,
Okay,
I will stop at just one of the regular patrol officers, talk to that patrol officer. How are you feeling? Are you happy about where you're at? Blah, blah, blah. I've actually had that conversation with, only one fire department guy.
okay.
Because I don't care about the fire department as much as I do police. Just kidding, guys. That's my shtick. But I do have more interaction with the police department than I do with the fire. So I have asked them, please, you know where my office is. If you don't, you need to figure that out because it's a great place to go and park whenever you really don't want to do anything but write a report. So please stop in. And if you have a problem, no names, come talk to us. That's
Understood?
And I have never had any police officer, whenever we've been one-on-one, say anything negative except they wanted more training. That was all I ever negative feedback I ever had.
But to be fair, Pastor Lindo was here the meeting before last.
Exactly.
Somebody was bending his ear saying that we needed some help in the police department. And so I grilled Ken Turner. I said, if we adopt this the way you have it, is the police department happy? You know, or are they going to be out there saying they didn't get what they wanted in this budget? And they were both extremely confident that the police department got everything that they asked for in this budget. So I don't think we're going to have that problem. I do think we still have a recruiting problem because it's hard to find them. We have some vacancies.
Scraping off
Wait.
the bottom of the bucket to get good people.
And that's why they
Just
probably
because
want
the
Is there a
police-
turnover problem?
Just because,
Yes, there's a turnover problem, but what I understand is the turnover problem is not because something with the city and they're moving or they're going into a different profession. It's not, they're not leaving us for another city for higher pay, from what I understand. But we are comparatively lower. So
Okay.
trying to get them in the door is harder.
but okay, so we're already short, so maybe, but we're building all these apartments. We're gonna need more officers at some point. And when you try and add officers to a budget, they cost money, a lot more. If you try to add like 5 officers, that's pretty costly compared to adding one, say, accounting clerk.
Mhm.
Okay, it's harder to add officers, it's harder to compensate officers, because there's more of them. But just because they say that the budget's gonna work for them, doesn't mean that it's gonna work for us. What's their response times? I mean, is anyone looking at response times? Is anyone,
From what I understand, that they do look at the response times, and that as long as we're meeting within the response time, the standards, that's when we say we're okay. I love Johnny, Johnny's amazing, but Johnny is a higher up and he's more political.
Oh, yeah, definitely,
So
yeah.
that's why we talk to the other officers and things like that, just to get a feel from them. I don't think that Johnny would ever say, I've got enough. I think he would always want more, but it's always it needs to be in that budget as far as what do you need, because I believe this group would be like, if you tell me you need this and you show us that, you need it in order to meet response times, yes, whatever you need is where we'd be.
Yeah, and also, we have competing additive things in the police budget, like the flock system, like essentially the dark web and things like that are adding to their costs. What we don't have is essentially a projection of, hey, we're going to get this much more money from the motel, the apartments that are being built, and that will, we're going to apply some of that to police and fire and so forth. We're not that smart yet.
I believe they're working on it. I believe they are working on it.
We have some revenue projections, but the question is, we don't know how many officers are needed for that build out. I guess that's part of what is the missing. I mean, they probably have an idea. I haven't asked them for it, but those apartments are about $250 a piece in terms of property tax revenue. In terms of when they're gonna hit, is a little bit more questionable, because there's 4 that are potentially coming. And then we kind of swagged about 300,000 in sales tax, once they're built out. With the additional people, if you kind of estimate what kind of impact that might have on the market based on our total population. So about 1.3 with all 4 of them.
Can I say, so you're saying the property tax value, the taxable property tax for the apartments will be how much?
The revenue that they'll pay to the city is about $250,000 a piece. Just rough estimates. So about 250, and then the other 2 that are gonna be in the North Lake area, maybe another 250 a piece. Those are probably a year or 2 beyond. Like we'll see probably half of one of these next year, the year after, and then maybe the full one the year after that. So it'll probably take 5 years before we'll have all 4 of them on the books paying that, but that's what we can reasonably estimate.
Go conservative and call it 750. Still a nice number.
But then how many officers do you need for that? Do you need 1 per apartment complex essentially, or do you need 1
It depends
per
on
4?
traffic and everything else. I mean, the apartments are gonna be kind of upscale.
Yes, ma'am, the council has really pushed that they are upscale apartments. We've required higher end finishes and things like that. We haven't done any of the PFCs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also because the proximity to the police department, there's probably less of a requirement for greater number of officers based on proximity type thing.
Police officers don't live at the.
I'm sorry?
Police officers are not like firefighters, they don't live at the house. I'm just saying.
They live in their car.
In parking lots.
Yes, sir. I wish they'd lived behind my office and hung out there. Y'all.
Any more EDC questions before Bear Hester?
I knew it.
Thank you very
It's
much.
all right.
Thank you all.
Well, I hope this doesn't sound horrible, but I'm gonna put it out there anyway. I've worked a lot of different companies before, and I've dealt with payroll, and I've dealt with benefits and all that. My question is this, and I hope I say it right. I worked at a company where a lot of people had been there for many years. So as they progress up the chain, their pay gets more and more and more and more and more and more, okay? Because they've been there for 20 years or whatever, okay? And then you got people starting, and then they're gonna work their way up. Well, so they each get raises along the way, and the person up here is making more than anybody else because they've been there longer and they have a responsible position. And then somebody new comes in to run the company and they're like, okay, everybody gets a certain percent raise every year. Okay, so the guy down here does get a bigger raise than the person up here. The person up here is already making a fortune more than anybody else. So I don't know if y'all ever do it across the board, but like there was across the board and the person up here should be capped. In other words, if they should be capped at 75,000 and now they're making 90,000 because of each year they were giving employees instead of individual, they were getting like everybody got a certain percent raise. And this person up here, they should be capped and not keep getting the money. And I don't know if we have anybody here that's been there that long or if it even works that way, but that's one place that I didn't think was fair to people, that this person was getting like percent of a large salary where this person down here was getting the same percent of a lesser amount. And they were starving, and these people up here keep getting like 2% of 75,000 is a lot more than 2% of 30,000. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if that's in this city or not. I don't know. I'm just asking because that was a big complaint I had when I worked there. I didn't think that was right.
And earlier Phil was kind of talking about how a couple of the departments, that's exactly what they're doing this year. They're giving the 7.5% to the lower paid to bring them, keeping up with the Joneses. And then the upper levels are just that smaller.
But is there a cap at some point?
There's not a cap.
There's never a cap.
But this is an improvement over how it's been, because it's been like you said, where it's been a flat percent for everybody.
Yeah.
Which means people at the top get a much larger per dollar.
It doesn't work for everybody, yeah.
They scale back the higher your salary is.
This year it is, yeah. And they said it was very difficult to program in the software, but they got it done.
No, it's.
I'm gonna take credit for it. I don't know
Good job.
I don't know if I deserve credit for it. But every year I say, can't we do a little bit more like merit-based or a little bit more targeted? So that's happening this year, so I'll take credit.
So there is a cap for.
There's not a cap,
there's
but
never a cap.
they're at least getting a smaller
A
percentage.
smaller, okay.
Because we're always trying to keep up with the Joneses, right? Because we don't want to, you don't want me doing your taxes. You want Phil doing your taxes. So,
He does my taxes.
right, see, so, I mean, we have to.
You have to give a raise to keep the upper people there so they don't
Yeah.
leave, because you got a lot of value in that person.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
And you want to keep them satisfied, at the same time you want to adjust the
Well,
lower
it being a
ones up
lesser
to keep
percent
them
makes more
going.
sense to me.
Yes,
But
ma'am. Because
the
if that
overall
high is,
percent was, because this person's been, every year they get like a lot more than these people, so.
But market conditions, again, are gonna like skew that. And the argument against what you're saying, and I support what you're saying, but the argument against it is it results in a compression to where the top and the lower start getting closer and closer together.
oh, we'll fix that, don't worry.
Again, I believe there's a significant difference between COLAs, cost of living increases, that are tied to essentially overall inflation expenses versus step increases in position. So a differential for step increases makes and limiting it
On your mark,
makes
on your
much
mark,
more sense.
it's it.
Bernie, thank you for putting this together.
Hey, thank you, it was great.
It's great to see y'all. Thank y'all.
Come back anytime.
Thanks, Larry.
Well, what is your proposal on today?
No,
Well,
I got
Concept.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It should be limited to a set that doesn't exceed the federal government set increase. So basically, again, for the federal government, for GS, so there are 3 grades of step increases in the federal government. Essentially, this would be a 30% increase over a 20-year period because the step increases come every other year for the most part.
Yeah, but break it down. So right now, we're 2.5% a year.
2.5% to grade.
Well, how would you program it? You would say what instead?
Well, I would say that the step increases should be limited to an equivalent amount of the federal increases.
That's really complicated, Bernie.
No, it isn't.
Can it be like 3% every 2 years or 3% every
No,
3? What is the,
If you're,
how does
About
it?
3.5%
I can
every
tell-
2 or 3 years, but once you get to step 10, that's it. You don't get any more step increases.
Yeah, we used to have that and then we extended it to 20.
yeah,
well,
that's,
I was capped for 6 years before I retired, so.
so
I think it's
basically,
step 10.
just FYI, The match point with federal government would be somewhere around, at the 2.5%, around 12 years.
Have you looked at any other entities besides the federal government?
State government, what do they do?
State doesn't do diddly squat, I can tell you that, I wouldn't say state. Look at the city of San Antonio. Look at, I don't know who else does it, Bear County, I don't know, do you know?
What's that?
Step raises it, who else has them?
I
But
think most school districts do.
look at some of the others, so you have something other than just the federal government to cite when you're trying to convince her.
And you gotta make it simple. So it needs to be like whether it's we're reducing it from 20 to 10 or 12, whatever that number was, or I'd also like to see some kind of merit-based consideration to where the 2.5% is not automatic.
That's not gonna happen.
I know it's not gonna happen, but that's what I would like to see. It's some discretionary, like a performance evaluation where they say, are we gonna give you your 2.5% step? It's anywhere between 0 and 2.5, depending on our
That sounds like
evaluation.
NSPS,
I would
National Security Personnel System, where it was kind of merit-based. You didn't automatically get a step increase. You got it based on how you were evaluated, what your performance rating was, your test and all that.
The state had that, the state had the merit base, as did the city.
That was while Bush was president. After Obama got in, that went out.
But when the state had it, there was like, you got this, the objective, measurable, quantifiable stuff. And then there's that works and plays well with others and runs the city and all that other crap. And, either you're in favor or you're not in favor. And if you're not in favor, you need to get a raise.
That's why they don't wanna do it, because they don't wanna be accused of favoritism.
Yeah, well,
But-
it's true though,
But
it's
I don't
true.
like somebody just breathing, getting
I
an
don't
extra
either.
2.5%.
I don't either. But I will tell you that the
Well-
other side of it's true. And,
Yeah.
I've watched people get raises and watched people get passed over and,
If that's all they're doing, you fire them. If you don't, you fire their boss.
Well, we only have one person we can fire.
no, you got a couple. I think the city clerk works for you.
Is that true?
I think so. City clerk's hired by the city council, I think. I don't know.
I think didn't we name her city clerk? We passed something that was like, we said she's now,
From deputy to city speed.
yeah, there's something official that we did, I don't know I didn't understand what it was.
But I'm sure the one person.
She got certified, that it was acknowledged.
Yeah.
That's the way it went.
That's all it wasn't something official.
I'm sure the one person you could fire is gonna be very happy to fire somebody under her.
To save her butt.
With Bear gone, are there any questions? Yeah.
I have a question. Are there any performance appraisals that are actually documented? And I mean, I would go through this much paperwork for performance appraisals for every employee. So did they have to fill anything out? Did they talk about their goal, or what their accomplishments have been, what their goals are, what their future goal is going to be, or
In other words,
anything?
performance standards.
No,
Yeah.
there are no performance
There
evaluations.
should be. There should be. It's not just, hey, you're my pal, so give me my raise now. It shouldn't be that way. Everything should be documented, right here, documented.
Well, let me say, I don't know. There may be, but I can say that there are people that have been let go that did very well the prior year, type thing.
See if they had that, I had that, all those documents. Yeah, I've dealt with all of it, and it's,
But again, that's beyond, that's beyond council, that's.
Yeah, yeah. That should be under management.
Yeah, but council does not even meet once a year with the city manager.
I know.
I don't
I know.
understand
That's,
I'm gonna put my chair back before she asks another question.
anything else?
Next time he's gonna say, you by yourself.
Thanks for all the work you do.
We appreciate it. But I really think that if we just get a little traction, we can move things faster.
We're here to push you right along.
We need to find a way to get that information out there. It's available.
But thank you very much.
Well, thank you, guys.
I'm sorry for all the questions, but
No,
Oh, you gotta
ask
ask
them
it when you
questions.
think of it, you know?
Huh?
You gotta
You ask them
ask it when
questions.
you think of it.
asked a lot. Actually, my husband Oh, there you are, you're putting chairs away? I thought maybe you left already.
No. In reality, it would be extremely difficult to do.
Oh, excuse me, you did a great job, thank you for all your documentation.
So we gotta get it to them first, and we gotta get the voters and then just get them all.
I got it, Kim.
It's more of an academic discussion.
It will be.
Okay.
I got it to bring to him.
It's the latest that we've got.
Thanks, Bernie, appreciate it.